Hey, welcome to the CMO Whisper Show. I'm your host, Steve Olensky. Part marketing practitioner, part ad agency veteran, part journalist. I was a writer for Forbes for 10 years. I've had so many insightful conversations over the years with business leaders, to athletes, to celebrities, to, of course, CMOs. The only difference now is instead of sharing those insights through written form, I'm doing it this way. My guest this week is Thomas Prather, the Chief Marketing Officer at Smashburger. Thomas brings over 30 years of marketing expertise, beginning in automotive advertising, where he managed Cadillac's Resurgence in 1995. Transitioning to the food and beverage industry in 2003, he joined Starbucks, eventually becoming VP of U.S. retail marketing. There, he drove growth across Starbucks' 17,000 plus U.S. locations, notably overseeing the brand's third-party delivery partnerships with UberEats and DoorDash, while leading the brand's most successful fall season with the 20th anniversary of the Pumpkin Spice Latte. As Smashburger CMO, Thomas now applies his extensive experience to drive the brand's growth through innovative global strategies. Focused on elevating Smashburger's brand presence, he aims to attract a broader audience by aligning the company's offerings with emerging trends and consumer expectations, all the while ensuring the brand remains both relevant and committed to delivering an exceptional guest experience. Thomas Prather, welcome to the CMO Whisper Show.
Steve, thanks for having me.
It is my pleasure. We are relatively new in our relationship. We just recently met, but we traveled many of the same circles. I know that. Indeed. A lot of the same hallways and people and connections and all that good stuff. So I want to jump in. I want to start, if you're cool with this, at a kind of a higher level, some thoughts just to marketing in general, and then get into some brand-centric stuff.
Sure.
So I want to start with I think a lot of people, a lot of marketers struggle, and that's balancing creativity and data and AI now in your approach to marketing strategy. So how do you, creativity, data, and now the omnipresent AI, how do those three kind of blend in, and how do they work in your approach and the brand's approach to marketing strategy?
Overall, I think how I approach anything in marketing is acknowledging that it's an art and a science, right? Mm-hmm. All of these things have to work together in order for us to communicate something unique and interesting to a consumer and get them to adopt the message. So creativity then applied through the lens of AI, great data about where our customers are, just means I have a more relevant message in the right place at the right time. So I think they all work together. And I'll say one other thing on thinking full funnel and not just thinking of, I think a lot of marketers, especially in my industry, get a little trapped in the world of performance marketing and just worrying about conversion. And they forget about the messages of like keeping your brand top of mind, keeping your brand differentiated in the consumer's mind. So you can't just drop down to the bottom of the funnel and stay in conversion, which is what a data-centric model would be. You need to have the mix. You need to be thinking about the mix and how we're getting the right message to a customer.
I'm so glad you went there because I saw something recently, I don't know if it was a survey, study, or something, where they were delineating between, do you need a brand CMO or a performance CMO? And I'm reading this going, why do you need to pick between the two?
Yeah, you can't pick between the two. Like you have to have both. Like I have to have demand gen happening and I have to keep growing, strengthening the brand and differentiating it. And I think it's a false choice to think they're separate.
I completely agree with you. I think it ties into, which you and I both know, unfortunately, very well, those studies that seem to come out every year about the average CMO tenure being whatever, the shortest in the C-suite, and on and on and on. And I just keep going back to the misconception and misperception and misunderstanding of people who just don't, quote unquote, get marketing.
Well, I think, and something I try to do at Smashburger with our leadership team is make sure I'm coming to the table as a business partner and I am in the front of planning, and that marketing is not an afterthought of like how we'll execute something, but marketing is how we reach our customers and how we grow the brand, which is fundamental. And I should understand the business fundamentals, where margin plays. Like I should understand all that and be able to speak to that just as well as the finance guy, just as well as the ops person. And so I used to do this thing. This is kind of silly, but I used to make my presentations as ugly as possible because I didn't want to reinforce when people think of marketing as just the razzle dazzle creative stuff. Marketing is a business partner to you. And I think if we position ourselves that way with our leadership team colleagues, we're at the table in the front, and we're not in this place where it's marketing is an afterthought and you're on your heels constantly. I actually, most of the time, I am so far ahead because, I have to think about what is going in Q1 and what's going in Q2, that I have a hard time like, oh, what happened last week and what's going on next week, where the CFO is looking at performance every week. I'm looking at it, but I am so much more thinking of like where the trends are going and where we have gaps to fill, and make sure I have a plan for that on the out months.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you did that. That you do that with the presentations. It almost like eliminates this is nothing about sizzle. I'm showing you the steak.
Absolutely. Yeah. At the end of the day, if we don't hit our numbers, we're not solvent. So marketing has to be viewed as business function and part of the mix there.
Yep. Yeah, exact. Part of the mix. That's it. I mean, that's just it. And kudos to you and for doing that with your fellow C-suiters at Smashburger, of understanding that marketing is not a stepchild. We're part of the overall package, if you will.
Yeah.
I'm going to pivot into something, brand loyalty, right? Which of course is one of the holy grails for anybody. But how do you look at, how can a brand, you want to talk about Smashburger, that's fine, or even agnostic, of get to that holy grail of brand loyalty and then connect with consumers on that deeper level? How do brands do that?
First of all, it's about consistency in the experience. And that's the most important thing. Like we just did a new brand identity launch, and that might attract people and make them feel like this brand is something they want to associate themselves with, that like fits their vibe, it fits who they see themselves as. But if the food doesn't deliver and the experience doesn't deliver, I'm not going to get their loyalty. So yes, we have a loyalty program. We just launched a new app. We have the right elements there, but in the restaurant business, the food and the service in the moment are the things that are going to make the difference on it being sticky. Just being friendly is a big first step. Asking how things were, and then focused on the quality of the food we have. We did, as part of our new menu relaunch, we did all retraining for all of our restaurants for our, what we call gold standard, for both front of the house and back of the house. And we made that an element because it's so critical, the guest experience. We also added some things in that just made dining in feel more experiential and more memorable than transactional. Like little things like we serve our shakes in a chilled parfait glass with a cooler on the side so that you can kind of finish it up on your own. And just as that walks through the restaurant, it says something about like the care we put into things. And so there's a few other elements like that we added to the experience. And again, it all goes together, because if that's a memorable experience and someone was friendly and the food's great and they ask you how it was, you'll come back again. I
don't want to say it's so obvious, but I think it is. That we're saying that, if I'm coaching, counseling, working, consulting with a company, I'm like, if your product isn't great and your customer service isn't, it doesn't matter what the marketing's doing, because that's ultimately what's going to bring them back, is how good the product is, how good the service is, how friendly the staff is, how clean, in your case, the locations are.
Absolutely. Yeah. A thing that, maybe back to my idea of making the presentations as ugly as possible, of like, I just always preach the fundamentals of marketing and the 4 Ps. And, it is really like, I love the razzle dazzle stuff, but this is really about getting the fundamentals right. Like, do we have a great product? Is our pricing strategy good? Are we in the right locations? And then are our promotions compelling, right? Like all the basic stuff you learned in school still apply.
Marketing 101.
Yeah.
In fact, I was just having this conversation with somebody earlier about, they noticed, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, that they're seeing a swing or a trend back to more quote unquote traditional marketing in a broad sense, whether it's the platforms or whether it's the channels, whether it's the messaging. Are you sensing any of that? Like it's kind of flying in the face of the digital AI automated world we're living in?
Again, I think it needs to be kind of thought of holistically. Where I am seeing that come through is people consume media like all over the place. It's really hard to pin down one thing. So you have to think through what elements of your media planning, your approach are doing what job. So I have part of my media approach doing the job to get people onto our website or onto our app to transact with us. But then I have another side of it that is just like a little bit more about us. So someone who has shown interest in Smashburger, I'm going to validate that why they care about Smashburger with some cool video about our process and like that we hold the burger down for 10 seconds to get the perfect sear on it. Little things like that that kind of can keep bringing them in deeper with the brand. But that's part of my plan. So I think that's going to lead me more to some traditional stuff like a 15 spot, but I don't know what percent of the mix that's going to be for me. But it's so dynamic how people consume media these days that you just frankly have to be nimble.
Extremely. I thought, what's new now is old in 30 seconds.
Absolutely.
Customer feedback. Talk to me about how the brand captures it, what you do with it, what role does it play in your strategy? Everybody wants feedback, but what do you do with it, right?
Yeah. And I think understanding the customer and their experience is so fundamental to making all of the decisions on the fundamentals of marketing. So before we put something in market, we do pilots, then we do intercepts, then we do focus groups to really understand if the thing we had out there is doing the intended job. So for our menu test, for example, we simplified our menu so that it really showed burgers, and we cut a lot of things out. And we heard back from consumers that simplified menu didn't make them think of all the stuff that used to be on the menu. It reinforced to them that we're burger experts. So like that was great to get that feedback early, and we rolled it in. And then on an ongoing basis, we have a customer service system called our Voice of Customer, and it's an online survey that people fill out that we can cut a whole bunch of ways. It's still pretty early. I'd like to see more adoption of that, but I at least am happy we have a system where we can consistently go in by location and see how we're doing. And it's a good partnership with my team and the operations team on understanding what's going on. And there are things that, like, I'm responsible for product as well. There are things that I should be thinking about for the next menu iteration, like what we offer, that could solve something that's coming up repeatedly in a customer survey.
Interesting. Yeah, because look, we all say this as leaders and we want to hear from our customers. And it's literally, the cliches, you got to take the good with the bad.
Yeah.
Right? I get that. But I don't think marketers in general give customers and consumers enough credit when it comes to, wait, you asked me for my feedback, right? Okay, I know I'm only one person, but are you doing anything in response to my feedback? And if they don't see changes, at least the smallest of things, they're going to notice that.
Yes. And how you show them you've made a change is part of the game, right? So we're having something, we took one of our menu items off that was popular but not differentiated. And I would say it wasn't the biggest contributor to the business. That was one of the reasons we took it off. And as we're seeing people kind of complain about it on social and try to start a thread on it, we're trying to have some fun with it now of like, okay, like what else do you want to see back? And turn it into a positive of where we're engaging with them. And it's like, if you're like, I love that you're this invested in our menu and you have a favorite item. Like everyone now, let's start talking about what your favorite items are. Like, tell us what you want the menu to look like. And that becomes a much more engaging way for us to show that we've seen feedback, responded to it. And we might not do what you're asking, but we've heard you and we're listening and we care about what you say in a way that kind of moves the conversation forward instead of saying, sorry, we effed up. This should be different.
Interesting. So I get a lot of leaders on my show and a lot of leaders who listen to my show. I always like to ask this question of someone in your situation, in your role as a leader. How do you inspire and empower your team, right, to stay innovative and keep pushing and on and on and on? How do you do that as a leader?
A lot of it is about just setting the vision overall of where we're trying to go. And I'm so fortunate on this brand. It has so much potential and a great backstory that I paint the picture of like what it should look like in 5 years. Even our logo, the logo we just changed, there was a lot of conversation about the word mark versus the logo icon versus how clear we have to be. Like we used to have one that shows us Smasher on Smashburger, and you'll still see that at restaurants. But I wanted something that was more esoteric, that people could put meaning behind, because in the future, I want to just use the logo.
Mm-hmm.
And so using that as an example to my team of like, that's how bold and brave we can be with this brand. If you think about it being as iconic as my former employer, like dream really big like that.
Yep.
And like we have a leadership team that is looking for ideas. And so you're not on your heels anymore. Like you are in a place where you're a driver and we want to hear from you. So keeping open doors, setting a vision, creating venues where they can share ideas and talk about what they're interested in is how I keep my new team. Like I've only been in role for just over 6 months now.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm also getting to know them and trying to motivate them based on what they're interested in. But the biggest thing is setting a vision of where we could go and how exciting that is as marketers.
So since you went there, I want to expand on the brand and the backstory and the background for those not familiar with it when it comes to Smashburger. What can you tell us?
Sure. So Smashburger was founded in 2007 by Tom Ryan, who is actually a food scientist. And it's very interesting when we have tastings with him because he'll geek out on the Maillard effect and like why the process was done this way, why they chose certified Angus beef and a certain ratio of how we get that delivered fresh, never frozen. And in 2007, Smashburgers as an away from home concept was totally new. And it was early also in kind of the fast casual space where you're going to wait a little bit longer for your food, but everything is prepared fresh made to order, right? So like our burgers aren't sitting on a warming tray anywhere. Like you order it, it gets made right then when you order it. So yeah, it takes 4 minutes, 5 minutes versus a fast food burger that's way quicker. But the quality is so much better and the kind of care in every step of how we season the burger, how we season the fries. The oil we use for the fries is a tallow blend, so it's way yummier. The way we assemble the burger so that like the burger always comes through. Like we have a spicy burger right now with jalapenos and on a chipotle bun, but you're never going to lose the beefy burger flavor. And that's an intentional thing for us because at our core, we're a burger place.
Before I go on, let me just state for the record, as we're recording this, I have not eaten anything today. So this is very much cruel and unusual punishment. About this food.
So when I say juicy burger, that's a problem.
I just want to get that on the record. And then you're talking about jalapeno, like, oh my God, he's killing me. I'm just teasing, but the new visual identity, you're talking about the logo. What else was part of that? What else went into the thinking? Like, what did you want to convey? Because you're so right about, to me, one of the ultimate goals of a logo, if nothing else, is to stand on its own. Mm-hmm. So what went into your thinking of the logo? Did you change colors? The visual identity as a whole. Talk to us about what went into the thinking there.
Yeah, that was such an exciting project for me. And again, we had so much history to work from that we wanted it to be in the same family so it wouldn't look disruptively new. Maybe that's not the way I want to say that. It would feel like a relative. So for colors, we did like adjust an orange that we had been using for a while. So there was this through line to something in the orange family. And then the other colors we kept kind of simple to the category. But what we were really trying to do is if we looked at our audience, so back to audience insights and hearing from customers, what they said about us was the burger, I'll say it again, our incredibly juicy, yummy burgers are really delicious, but they didn't know who we were. And when they talk about themselves, they're independent. They don't follow the crowd. They think for themselves. There's a little Americana kind of aspect to them. So with the visual identity, we wanted to go bolder, more in your face. And I think more confident overall is another word I'd use. So like some of the language in our lines is way more in your face, like eat like no one's watching is one that we just love because that just expresses like we want to see you enjoying the food and getting messy and getting the drip down your shirt because we love it too. So I think there's a relatability and human side to it. And we were fortunate enough to work with X&O, who is agency, non-agency, but super creative. And they had worked with our researchers on the positioning work that we did ahead of this to help us understand that we did need to do a rebrand because we didn't mean anything in the consumer's mind. And that was going to be a barrier for us forever if we didn't get that right as back to foundational. If we didn't get that right foundationally, we could do whatever we wanted to do, but people wouldn't attribute it back to Smashburger.
You bring up a great point, thinking about the brand equity, right, of a logo and I'm not going to pick on them, but I will, because we all know the infamous Tropicana logo from years ago and what happened there. Mm-hmm. That's a big responsibility you have, right? Because there are going to be, here's that word again, loyalists to the brand and to a logo. And I'm sure that absolutely entered your conscious and your agency. And, that's a big responsibility when a brand changes a logo.
Absolutely. And it's funny, like one of the things I say about my career overall is I am motivated by responsibility. Like every job I take, it's not necessarily the title. It's I get more scope and more responsibility. And then I have these moments where responsibility also means pressure. And so I get equally excited and exhilarated or terrified, right? So for this logo project, that's exactly the state I was in. I was excited about seeing the iterations of it. And then I would get terrified about how it's going to show up in the world and how people are going to respond to it. But I appreciated the trust my leadership team put in me to move this forward. I am a pretty humble person overall. So I would check in often of like, here's what I'm thinking. I'm a little nervous about this area and this area. Are you seeing that too? Like little questions like that versus a ta-da presentation. Do you like it? I would bring them along the way and share really what was in my head to see if we could keep going. And that ended up being a really great way. We made some moves during the development that I think had this land in a place where it made us all enough uncomfortable that we thought it was something memorable. Like that was part of, I think, the brief too, was like, make us a little bit uncomfortable because that tells us we have something sticky, something memorable.
That gets massive respect from me, the fact that you use that word, because it gets the word disruption, we both know gets tossed around a lot, right? But uncomfortable, I really like that you had that conscious thought to go, guys, just so you know, going into this, we're going to get uncomfortable here, but that's okay. And not only is it okay, it's a good thing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I love that. Massive kudos to you for that, because again, people, humans are reluctant to change.
Yeah. And we're not going to get it all right. Like, as we start rolling out packaging, for example, we made some choices of where we took off some of the language. We have like right now we say better burger, I think on our to-go packaging. And I pulled off like that quality language because I want our branding to just be bold and assertive. And I hope that's the right decision. I think there's other places where we're giving the quality cues. So I think it was the right decision, but these are things that I am sure as I see things out in the world, I'm going to doubt this decision, that decision, and the other one. But, we're not doctors and we're not running around with scalpels, so no one dies. It is just we're making some decisions based on our experience and how we want the customer, and in our case for restaurants, the restaurant staff, the team members, how we want them to respond and feel about things. And in this case, we wanted them really to feel confident. One of the things I said at our leadership conference is I really wanted this brand to get its swagger back. It was a brand that has all the right to be confident and say we truly have like the best burgers, but everyone would kind of, well, when we're good, they're great. Well, they're always great because we have great training standards and great ingredients. And I was hearing kind of this really on our heels kind of feedback from team members, and I was a little bit echoed in what we were hearing from the consumers. We just didn't know who you were. So let us know who you are and maybe we'll engage with you. Mm. That all shows that like sometimes you can't be the quiet one in the room. You have to peacock a little bit. And, that's a good thing in this case.
Absolutely. There's confidence and then there's arrogance.
Yeah. Yes.
You're confident.
Yeah. And there was a time in my career recently, actually, where that line between, I said earlier, I'm kind of humble person. Mm-hmm. And I really get irritated when I see someone who's behaving in a way that's with hubris and really arrogant. And the line I had between humility and arrogance was like right next to each other. And I had to learn like there is a very wide array between the two. And if you're doing it with intent, like we just talked about, confidence is actually going to help us deliver better customer service. It's going to help us innovate our menu items more. It's going to help us show up in ways that are interesting to the customer because we have to earn, right? Yep. The attention we get.
Yep.
And if we're in a place where we're always feeling on our heels and, oh, I'm just a humble person and I'm not going to be loud this time, we're just going to miss out and it's going to be on us. So getting us to this place where we got our swag back and we can show off a little bit and we can introduce bold things again. I'll say again, because in 2007, when we started, we had specific burgers for each of our regional locations, which no other brand was doing at the time. It adds a lot of complexity to the system. But we wanted to say, here we are, Omaha, and here's a burger that we think speaks to you specifically. I think we would need to be in a place where we can do those kinds of things again and justify the complexity because of how we're connecting with a customer and, back to the loyalty thing and having them see that we care deeply about how they feel.
Exactly. This is the most simplistic thing I can say is, and on this last topic is, if you don't think you have the best burger, no one else will.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Okay. Now we're going to have some fun. At the end of each episode, Thomas, I do what I call the random 5.
Okay.
And what I do is I have this database of thousands of these random podcast questions that want to show off your personality, right? And I just plug in, give me 5. And these are the 5 that came out for you.
Oh, okay.
All right. Number 1. What's one book, movie, or album you would take with you to a deserted island and why?
Book, movie, or album? I'm going to do movie and album.
Sure.
So movie, and this is a random one, but I love the John Malkovich version of Dangerous Liaisons.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like the beauty of the scenery and that time frame and the costuming and stuff is amazing. But the human story and how they're kind of terrible to each other, like, just always gets me. The acting in that was just amazing. I just felt so much for the characters. So that's the movie.
Okay.
And then the album is, it's funny. I don't know the name of the album. It's the Spice Girls' first album.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I had Spice Girls stuff all over my office. I was working in advertising and my colleagues would just laugh at me so much. And I'm like, you guys, they're the ultimate in marketing. Like, in less than a year, they're the number 1 band in the world.
Yeah.
With these huge contracts and whatnot. And they tapped into something that was out there in the world that girl power people wanted to see and went with it. Like, I felt like that was a great lesson for marketers. And so as much as my colleagues teased me, I stood by it and my office was all Spice Girls all the time.
I love that. I love it. Question number 2. What's the most unusual job you had before your current career and what did you learn from it?
The most unusual job. In college, in grad school, I worked at a business incubator that the university ran. And so we worked with a bunch of startup tech companies to kind of help them grow. And this is probably a little bit of where I formed like that marketing needs to be all about the 4 Ps. And it's not just about the promotion P and creativity, but working with engineers and getting the translation of how they talk about their thing to have them clearly say to me, like, and what's in it for the customer and what's in it for the customer, what's in it for your audience was so interesting to me, having to work with people that just had such a different way of thinking about things. So maybe that's not super unusual, but if you work in a bubble all the time, getting out of the bubble and saying that people like come at things in so many different angles was good for me to learn of like how I meet someone where they are and then ask the questions in a way that they can understand and give me the information I need to best figure out how to connect a potential audience with a potential product or service. So that's my example.
Gotcha. Next question. What's one of your favorite ways to unwind or recharge after a busy day?
I like taking walks and in the cities, like it's not a hike. I just walk with this nice combination of looking at the architecture of the city, looking at a park and being out in nature, seeing people. It just takes you out of whatever's in your head. And something as simple as I saw this the other day, like we live downtown and every once in a while, an eagle or a hawk comes into town and like watching how the pigeons and the crows and the seagulls all react when the hawk or the eagle are in town. Like I can't think about what just happened in my day. I'm like, wow, this is like nature happening right in front of me. How cool is that?
Right. That's pretty wild. I love that. Okay. Who's been one of the most influential people in your life and how did they impact you?
This is an easy one, although it's going to come across pretty trite, is my dad is the most influential. He was the first kid that was in his integrated high school in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and the only one of I think there was 5 students that were integrated, the only one that graduated. Then he ended up in the Army, retired as a major general. And so my dad's, and maybe this is where I get that responsibility thing from, like that was one of his sources of pride, that he always followed through on anything he started and set these expectations for us as kids of set your sights high, but make sure you do the work and follow through because people are counting on you. Mm-hmm. And I think that stuck with me.
Last question. What's a personal mantra or motto you live by?
I don't know if I have one, but here's one that I remind myself of. If I am in my head, I will talk about like, what's my highlight reel? I'm really good at figuring out all the things I've done wrong on something, but most of the time people do more right than wrong, and focusing on like, I really crushed this thing, that thing, and the other thing. I mean, for me in this job, in 6 months to launch new brand identity, have a menu pilot, have the menu then go live, like those are highlight reel things that I should always look back on and say, like, I did that. I'm, a pretty successful person. So thinking of your highlight reel, I didn't think of it as a mantra, but maybe it is a mantra to kind of get me back to a place where I'm confident and positive and thinking about the next thing that's going to be on my highlight reel.
I love that. That's a great way to end this. Thomas, I cannot thank you enough for your time. What a great conversation. Really, really engaging, educational. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Pleasure to be here with you.
Well, that wraps up another episode of the CMO Whisperer Show. I hope you shared this episode with your friends. And if you have not already, please subscribe to be kept up to date on all the latest episodes. And if you're so inclined, leave me a review on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you.